Okay, guys, we're back here once again with our North Carolina Coach book, and we are looking at how living things interact with we are looking at the flow of the energy in the ecosystems, which is on page 115 in your North Carolina Coach book. I'm going to get started in reading, and if you want to follow along, you're more than welcome to. Living things need energy for all the processes of life. They get that energy from their ecosystem. Energy passes from one living thing to the next in an ecosystem. It flows through an ecosystem along many different paths. The amount of energy available for living things changes as the energy moves along these paths. Food chains. Recall from lesson 8 that energy is the ability to make things move or change. An organism needs energy to live. A food chain is a model that shows the path of energy as it flows from one living thing to the next. A model is something that represents a real object, event, or process. Notice that the food chain below begins with the plant. All plants are producers. Remember that from lesson 18, that a producer is a living thing that makes its own food. Producers make food by using sun's energy. All food chains begin with producers, so that the sun's energy plays a very important role in every food chain. So, the plant shown above uses the energy of sunlight to make its own food. The food stores energy from the sun. The plant uses most of the energy to live and grow. The plant stores the rest of the energy in its leaves, roots, and other parts. The caterpillar is a consumer. Remember that a consumer gets energy by eating other living things. When a caterpillar eats plants' leaves, the energy stored in the leaves goes into the caterpillar's body. The caterpillar uses most of its energy to crawl, grow, and do other things. It stores the rest of the energy in its body. The amount of blank available for living things changes as energy flows from one living thing to the next in an ecosystem. The amount of blank available in living things changes as energy energy. The amount of energy available for living things changes as energy flows from one living thing to the next in an ecosystem. A food blank is a model that shows the path of energy as it flows from one living thing to the next. So a blank shows you from one living thing to the next a food chain. All food chains begin with a plant that makes their own food using the energy from the sun. When a consumer eats a producer, it uses most of the energy that is stored in the producer, but also blanks some of the energy. So we're going to turn the page because we're going to find out what happens after the caterpillar eats it. The bird and the fox are also consumers. When the bird eats the caterpillar, the energy stored in the caterpillar goes into the bird's body. The bird uses most of that energy to stay warm, fly, build a nest, and do other things. The bird stores the unused energy in its body. Then the fox eats the bird. The fox uses most of the energy from the bird and stores the rest in its body. Suppose some kind of organism is removed from the food chain. All of the other organisms in the food chain will be affected. The other organisms may die or move away to survive. The ecosystem will no longer be in balance and will change. Say that all the caterpillars in the forest get sick and die. The plants that the caterpillars would have eaten may grow and spread too much. They may use up things such as water that other plants need to live. The birds that depend on the caterpillars for food may die too. Then the foxes that eat birds would have less food. The foxes may leave the forest ecosystem survive. organisms and other food chains in the forest will also be affected. Okay? When a consumer eats a producer, it uses most of the energy that was stored in the producer, but also blank some of the energy. What does it also do to the energy? It stores some of the energy. The pattern continues as organisms consume each other. If one organism is blank from the food chain, all other organisms are affected and the ecosystem becomes blank. So if one organism is removed from the food chain, all of the organisms affected in this ecosystem becomes... What's going to happen? Where did I see it? Well, we could write this word, but I was thinking the word would be unbalanced. I'm going to write unbalanced here. Food chains show the energy in a straight line, but in an ecosystem, these chains connect to form a food blank. Okay. Food webs. A food chain shows a flow in energy from one living thing to the next in one straight line. But the flow of energy in nature is more complicated. In an ecosystem, several food chains connect to form a food web. See how many food chains you can trace in the food below. In the food web above, the grasshoppers are not the only ones that eat the plants. So look at your grasshoppers. Your grasshoppers eat your plants. Your rabbits also eat your plants, okay? The rabbits and small birds also eat them, too. They, in turn, are eaten by both foxes and hawks. The fungi and bacteria get energy from the waste that remains of the plants and animals after they die. Put your finger on any animal in the food web on page 116 and follow the arrows backwards. You will end up where all food chains and food webs begin, with a producer. No matter what an animal eats, the energy in its food became from a producer. The energy that most all animals get their food can be traced back to plants, and plants get their energy from the sun. Just as with the food chain, if one kind of organism is removed from the food web, all of the other organisms in the food will be affected. The ecosystem will change. Suppose a fire kills most of the rabbits in a forest. Then the foxes and hawks will have less to eat. They may eat more small birds and other animals, or they may leave the forest to find food. So looking up here, food chains show the flow of energy in a straight line in an ecosystem. These chains connect to form a food web. If one organism is removed from the food web, blank, the other organisms are affected by the ecosystem change. So if I remove one from the food web, all other organisms in the food web will be affected. The ecosystem will change. So right here, what are we going to write? All the other ecosystems will be affected and the ecosystem will change. In an ecosystem, energy moves from blank to the smaller animals to bigger animals to the biggest web. So we need to look at this part right here. Energy pyramids. Energy moves through the ecosystem. It goes from plants to smaller animals to bigger animals to the biggest animal. But remember, each animal uses most of its energy stored in its food. Each animal stores only part of the energy it gets from the plant or animal it eats. The diagram below is called an energy pyramid. It shows the amount of energy left for consumers changes as energy moves through the food chain or food web. The bottom level of the energy pyramid always contains consumers. This level is the widest. It holds the most energy and is the most living things. Notice that the levels become narrow as you go up the pyramid. Each higher level contains less energy and fewer living things. Grass plants use the most energy they take in. They pass on only a small part of it to the crickets. So there must be more grass plants than crickets. Crickets also pass on a small part of the food energy to shrews. So there must be more crickets than shrews. The same thing happens at each level of the pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, not much energy is left. Only a few hawks can find enough food in an ecosystem. So, in an ecosystem, energy moves from blank to smaller objects to bigger objects. So in an ecosystem, energy moves from plants to small objects to bigger animals and the biggest animal. Each animal uses most of the energy that is stored in its food and stores only a blank of the energy. Part of the energy. An energy pyramid shows the amount of energy left for consumers changes as the energy blank through the food chain. As the energy what? Moves through a food chain. The blank level, which represents the producers, holds the most energy and the most living things. So the what level of the pyramid? The bottom level, which represents producers, holds the most energy and the most living things. Each higher level contains blank energy and fewer living things. So as you move up the pyramid, each higher level contains less energy and fewer things. At the top of the pyramid, not much energy is left, so only blank organisms can find enough food. So only this one, we could write hawks or we could write carnivores, right? At the top of the pyramid, not much energy left, so only I'm going to write small or few. I'm going to write few. Few organisms can find enough food because there's not as many of them, so there's few. If we turn the next page, we'll look at our questions. Question number 1. Where would a decomposer be in the food chain? A, at the beginning. B, between a producer and a consumer. C, between two consumers. Or D, at the end. Mice and rabbits eat plants. Hawks eat mice and rabbits. Suppose a disease kills most of the rabbits in the meadow ecosystem. Which of these is least likely to happen? So let me read that again. Mice and rabbits eat plants. Hawks eat mice and rabbits. Suppose a disease kills most of the rabbits in the ecosystem. Which is least likely to happen? A, the hawks will move to another meadow. B, the hawks will eat more mice. C, the mice will not have enough food. Or D, the mice will have more plants to eat. Which is least likely to happen? What does a food web show? A, the flow of food between animals. B, the flow of energy through an ecosystem. C, the flow of water through an ecosystem. Or D, the flow of food between decomposers. And number 4, which group of living things makes up the bottom level of the energy pyramid? A, consumers. B, herbivores. C, carnivores. Or D, producers.